Hi everyone, it's Nightfighter22 here. I hope you guys are all well, and welcome to this extremely interesting and very aggressive game of chess. This was played by Paul Morphy, who was considered the best chess player of his generation, against Count Isouard and the Duke of Brunswick. This is known as the Opera House game, just because it was played in an opera house. It was played in 1858, I believe, in Paris. And Paul Morphy managed to checkmate his opponent in about 18 moves. And he had a lot of sacrifices as well. I think the only pieces he had other than pawns and kings when he was finished was one rook and one bishop. So let's go ahead and take a look at the game. It was very, very interesting. Paul Morphy had white. He started out with pawn to e4. Probably arguably the most tactical and dynamic opening for chess, but I don't want anyone to contradict me on that. And e5, pretty standard stuff, knight to f3, and here we see the Phillidors Defense. We don't see the standard knight to c6, we see the Phillidors Defense. Quite passive, but again, a very sort of subtle, quite solid line, I'd say. And now we see pawn to d4. This is just the standard Phillidors Defense. I've played this many times. And from here, Paul Morphy plays bishop to g4. This isn't really seen as an extremely common move nowadays, just because pawn takes, and then you can take with queen, and then after king takes, then this knight can go ahead and win the pawn because it's no longer pinned because the queens are off the board, which is why you don't often see this all this time. Obviously, the knight will also be threatening a fork on f7 after this happens. But anyway, you know, it's a decent enough move, pinning knights. So this is what you see: pawn takes, and obviously his opponents saw the line which I just explained. So they traded off the knight before recapturing, and then took back with the pawn. And from here, Paul Morphy plays the very aggressive, very appetizing bishop to c4. And what you can see is already on the 6th move, there is a checkmate on f7, because if queen takes, then the king will not be able to move at all. So the Count Isouard and the Duke of Brunswick defend with knight to f6. This is developing the pieces. Also, it is sort of attacking the pawn. It's sort of making the queen defend this pawn, and development at the same time, effectively blocking the f-file to stop the queen from coming in and taking the pawn on f7, which would be checkmate. But the queen now slides over to b3, firstly leaving the pawn undefended, but also double attacking with this bishop on f7, threatening the check. And also that's quite nasty after something like king d7. Then there's also queen e6. And that can be pretty checkmate-ish, I should say. Also the b7 square, actually. The b7 square, and then the knight has to move to d7. Paul Morphy can win a couple pawns. So he's threatening a lot of things here on the 7th move, queen to b3. So which is why you wouldn't see the black side capture the pawn on e4 here. Instead, queen to e7. This basically sorts out the threat here. And if Paul Morphy did go ahead and take this pawn on b7, actually, I believe queen b4 check can be played, and that forces the trade of queens, or it forces the loss of Morphy's queen anyway. But obviously it'll be check, forking the king and the queen, so Morphy would have to take, and the queens will be off the table. And that's not what Paul Morphy wants, because he's a very aggressive player and makes very good use of his queen. So now we see knight to c3. This just contributes to this attack on the king side, possibly hopping into the b5 square or the d5 square to go ahead and further attack. Obviously there's a fork on c7 against the king and rook if this queen can be removed. And from here, c6 is played. I think this is kind of a weak move, because it is in one respect contributing to blocking this knight from coming to these two outpost squares, but it's also stopping black from developing the knight to the c6 square. And you really don't want the knight on the d7 square at the moment. c6 is a lot more appetizing and a lot more contributing to the center in these kind of positions. So now we see bishop to g5. This is where the attacking really starts to take place. If we flip it over to the black perspective, actually, you can really see it's not pleasant to play. I mean, this knight hasn't even moved yet. This bishop is going to take a long time before the bishop can even move. And then you've still got a castle. So it's going to take a while for black to complete development, if they complete development. And now you see pawn to b5. Now I really like Morphy's next move. Obviously pawn to b5 is good because it forces this bishop, well, it doesn't force it, but it basically there's no squares the bishop can go to. Can't go to d5, can't go to e6, can't go to f7. So it's really going to have to go back to d3 or back to e2. And then after this knight is developed, then the position's almost equal, and that's not what Paul Morphy wants, especially being a white player and one of the best chess players of his generation. So he goes ahead and sacrifices his knight here, and this is very effective for a couple of reasons. The main reason really is because it opens up this diagonal. After bishop takes, it opens up this diagonal, and also the d file is completely opened up now, completely all the way opened up, and this is going to be very good for Morphy attacking style. And also, you know, 2 pawns for the piece, not a bad exchange, really not a bad exchange. But especially with the advantages it gives him, I really think it was a very beneficial move. So what we see now is knight to d7, just blocking the check. King to d8 would be a bit dubious, as it really opens up the king, and then rook d1 can be played. But actually rook d1 was played anyway, or castling queenside with rook d1. Putting further pressure on the knight, and this is actually getting pretty dangerous, because if you look, if bishop takes, then if this knight takes, then the queen is 1. So for example, this knight really only has 1 defender, which is the queen, but it has 2 attackers, which is the bishop and the rook. And because it's pinned to the king, this is even more deadly, because this knight cannot move at all, because it's illegal. And this knight is pretty much pinned, because you don't really want to move it because of the queen. So this is very attacking all of a sudden, and there's not a lot that can be played. I mean, rook d8 is the only move that can really defend, but like, look at black's pieces all of a sudden. This rook has done nothing. It can't do anything. This bishop can't do anything. Even these knights can't do anything because they're pinned, and this rook can't do anything because it's now stuck. So literally, none of the pieces are doing anything. I mean, maybe this pawn on e5 is contributing to the d4 square, which is highly insignificant in this game. So, really, none of the pieces are doing anything, and Paul Morphy is making great use. And the next move, you see, rook takes d7. Really, it's just opening up the position, getting rid of the defender, and now this rook is pinned. He's making it even worse. So this rook is taking place of the knights. This rook has not got any active play because it's pinned. And now the other rook comes in. So this rook is pinned, this knight is pinned. Obviously you can't take back with queen because you'll lose the queen. So what black tries to do is they play the queen up to e6, the main reason is trying to initiate a queen trade, and to also get the knight out of the pin, to try and defend this rook. But now we see a very nice series of moves. We see bishop takes d7. And I really think this is a great move, because either black's going to lose the queen, or black's going to lose the game. Now, obviously, if black takes the bishop with the queen, then rook takes, and then after king takes, then he's got queen b7 check, and all sorts of nasty checks. And with this queen and bishop versus the bishop and rook, obviously that's not a fair exchange in itself, but there will be some sort of checkmate line with this bishop and rook coordinating against the king in the open fast, especially when the bishop and rook haven't even moved in the game. But what black did do, yeah, some of you might be thinking, why can't you take with knight? Well, if you take with knight, there's a very nice checkmate combination, which I'm going to show you. Knight takes d7 was played in the game. Unfortunately for the count and for the duke, they did not see the beautiful line which is just about to be played. But you can play queen b8 check. And basically, the king can't move on to the 7th rank here because the bishop is blocking. So now the knight is forced to take, and this opens up the d-file for rook d8 to be played, and that is checkmate. So that was an extremely beautiful game, played by Paul Morphy, one of my favourite chess grandmasters. You should really check him out. I might do another video on him soon. Very dynamic, and as I said, the 17th move of the game, rook d8 checkmate, and you can really see black obviously still has his queen, he still has a knight, he still has a bishop, he still has a rook, and literally all Paul Morphy has is one rook and one bishop. But the real difference was how many active pieces do you have, and this is always what the chess website says. I think his name's Kevin. He always says it's how many active pieces you have, and this game is a perfect demonstration of that. Paul Morphy, he sacrificed so many pieces, he had so few, but the great thing was he was making great use of them. You know, he was making great use of all his pieces here, great use of his queen, great use of his rooks. But the problem was that black did not have any active pieces at all. Okay, so thanks so much for watching the game, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment and subscribe, because I'll be doing many more exciting chess videos like this soon. I wish you good luck playing chess, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.